If there were an award for most expensive family argument in English history, the Battle of Hastings would win it by a mile. The date was 14 October 1066. The place was a ridge near Hastings, probably Senlac Hill. The prize was the crown of England. The cost was staggering. One king dead, thousands of soldiers killed, and the future of England rewritten in a single day. It began with a succession crisis. King Edward the Confessor died in January 1066 without a direct heir, which in medieval terms was less a constitutional inconvenience and more an invitation to war. Harold Godwinson, the most powerful noble in England, moved quickly and was crowned King Harold II. Sensible? Yes. Accepted by everyone? Not even close. Across the Channel, William, Duke of Normandy, insisted Edward had promised him the throne, and that Harold had sworn to support that claim. In Norway, Harald Hardrada believed he had his own dynastic right. And then there was Tostig, Harold's exiled brother, who decided family loyalty was overrated and joined Hardrada. Harold spent the summer waiting in southern England for William to invade. Instead, Hardrada and Tostig hit from the north. Harold marched fast, fought at Stamford Bridge on 25th September, and won a brutal victory. Harold died, Tostig died, the Viking thread collapsed. Then, naturally, the wind changed. William crossed the Channel and landed at Pevensey on 28th September. He fortified, raided nearby territory, and forced Harold into another emergency march, this time south. So, Harold arrived near Hastings with troops who had just fought a major battle and marched the length of England twice. If exhaustion were a weapon, both sides had it, but only one side had fresh cavalry waiting at the bottom of a hill.
Harold chose strong defensive ground on a ridge and formed the famous English shield wall, dense ranks of infantry with overlapping shields, anchored by elite housecarls wielding two-handed axes that could ruin both armor and morale in one swing. His army was mostly on foot, built for stubborn defense rather than flashy maneuver. William's army was different. It was a combined force of archers, infantry, and cavalry, Normans in the center, with Breton and Franco-Flemish contingents on the flanks. In modern terms, Harold had a reinforced steel door. William brought a toolkit. The battle likely began mid-morning. Norman archers fired first, but uphill shots into a tight shield wall were not ideal. Arrows lost force, shields absorbed impact, and the English line held. Norman infantry attacked uphill and were thrown back. Cavalry followed and met the same answer: axes, shields, and very bad luck. At one stage, part of William's line, often linked to the Breton wing, began to retreat, possibly in panic. Worse, rumors spread that William himself had been killed. In a medieval army, that's about as stabilizing as shouting fire in a crowded theater. William reacted immediately. He rode forward, lifted his helmet so troops could see he was alive, and rallied them. Whatever else you say about him, he understood battlefield psychology. Then came one of the most debated episodes in medieval warfare, the retreat that became a trap. Whether by design, desperation, or a bit of both, Norman forces pulled back and some English fighters pursued downhill. That pursuit broke formation. Once parts of the shield wall opened up, Norman cavalry exploited gaps, isolated pursuers, and cut them down. And that pattern mattered. Hastings was not won in one dramatic charge. It was won by repeated pressure, local collapses, reforming lines, and the slow erosion of English cohesion over a very long, very violent day.
As the hours passed, Harold's position became harder to hold. The English still fought fiercely, but fatigue mounted, casualties accumulated, and discipline became harder to maintain. William's forces kept cycling attacks, archers, infantry, cavalry, wearing down defenders who had no easy way to rotate men out of the front line. Sometime late in the day, the decisive event occurred. Harold was killed. How exactly is still debated. The Bayeux Tapestry gives us the famous image of an arrow to the eye, which is vivid, memorable, and probably the most famous face injury in British history. Other accounts suggest he may have been cut down in close combat by Norman knights. Both versions could contain truth in sequence, but certainty is not available. Medieval sources are many things. Synchronized and forensic are not among them. What is certain is this: once Harold died, organized English resistance began to collapse. Some of his household troops fought on around the royal standard, but with command shattered and daylight fading, the battle was effectively over. William had won the field. Victory in battle, however, did not instantly mean stable rule. William still had to secure the kingdom. He moved carefully toward London, avoiding unnecessary risk while applying pressure through force and intimidation. English leaders eventually submitted. On 25 December 1066, William was crowned king at Westminster Abbey. Hastings, then, was not merely a tactical win, it was the hinge point of a conquest. And this is where the story becomes larger than one battlefield. Because once William took the crown, he didn't just replace a king. He replaced an elite, reorganized landholding, and remade how power worked in England. The old Anglo-Saxon ruling class was gradually displaced by Norman lords. Castles rose across the landscape as instruments of control. Administration hardened, taxation sharpened, resistance was crushed. The crown changed hands in a day. The country changed over generations.
The long-term consequences of Hastings are enormous. First, land ownership was transformed. William redistributed estates to loyal followers, creating a new Norman aristocracy tied directly to the king. In political terms, it was a reset button pressed with mailed fists. Second, language shifted. Old English survived, but Norman French became the language of court, law, and high society. Over time, the fusion of Anglo-Saxon grammar and French-Latin vocabulary helped create Middle English and eventually Modern English, with its habit of having multiple words for everything, depending on whether you're in a pub, a courtroom, or a palace corridor. Third, governance became more centralized and documented. William wanted to know exactly who owned what and who owed what. The Doomsday Survey of 1086 stands as one of medieval Europe's most impressive administrative projects, part census, part tax ledger, part warning label. Fourth, England's political orbit tilted more toward continental Europe. The links between English kings and French territories would shape centuries of diplomacy and war. Hastings did not end a conflict, it launched a new geopolitical era. It's tempting to flatten this into heroes and villains, but the truth is less tidy. Harold was not just a noble patriot, he was a powerful operator in a ruthless system. William was not just a conqueror with a sword, he was also a calculating state builder. Both believed they were legitimate. Both used religion, law, and force to justify power. Both were very medieval about it. So if you want the one-line summary, here it is. The Battle of Hastings was a succession dispute that became a total system reboot. One king died on a hill, one duke became a conqueror, and England was permanently remixed, politically, culturally, linguistically, and psychologically. And perhaps the most enduring lesson is this: when people say a constitutional issue is just a technical matter, check whether someone nearby is assembling cavalry.